Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Folklore Podcast. I'm Mark Norman, folklorist and author, and today we're travelling to New England for a look at some of the strange tales coming out of that part of the US. Or, as the title of this episode tells us, Wicked Strange Tales. You'll get more of an explanation of that in a moment from my guest today and our tour guide through some of these stories, Jeff Belanger. Jeff is a well-qualified person for the job. He's the host of an Emmy Award-nominated series, New England Legends, and the co-host of a podcast with the same name. You may have seen him on your TV screens in the show Ghost Adventures, which he also writes and researches for. So, come along with us to the northeastern part of the US for a look at some of the strange tales that the states have to offer. Jeff, welcome to the Folklore Podcast. It's lovely to have you here. Let's start off, if we may, by just talking a little bit about yourself. Tell everybody about your background and why you're writing books about folklore and the paranormal and all of those sorts of areas.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. So my name is Jeff Belanger, and I grew up in an old New England town, which is the northeast corner of the United States. And there's a lot of history here. We have a culture where we sort of preserve, in other parts of the United States, a building gets to be 30, 40 years old. They tear it down and they put up something new. Around here, we tend to preserve our main streets and our homes and our stories and our ghosts and haunts and things like that. So where I grew up, I had friends that were just very matter of fact about their houses being haunted. And I was just intrigued by that. And I loved hearing the stories. And as I got older and started looking into becoming a writer, I wrote for newspapers. And around October, you go looking for these ghost stories for Halloween features. And I just got hooked. I got hooked because I love history. I love talking to people. And then finding out that sometimes, the history does back up some of these strange sightings. And then once you go down the rabbit hole, I mean, don't go a little ways, right? You go all the way. And I've been pretty much sucked in ever since.
It's an easy trap to fall into, isn't it? When you start to look at any of these sort of stories within folklore, and before you know it, you've gone a long way down an odd path.
Yeah, well, because you're like, well, why does this show up here? But it also shows up in Ireland, and it shows up in Alaska, and it shows up in Africa, and you start saying, well, that's really curious, was it carried by people, but sometimes some of these stories predate the travel, so. I love these fringe topics because we learn a lot about ourselves and our cultures. And we also get to talk about really important and big subjects without bringing in dogmas of religion and things like that. So if we talk about ghosts, what we're really talking about is death, number one, and what does the afterlife look like? And if you think it's just a story, that's okay. The story still has value. If you think it's more than a story, then it has even more value. And we can have this discussion under the guise of a story, as opposed to me trying to preach to you from some holy book or telling you my specific belief system says you have to go A, B, C, or D, and so on. And I love that. I love that we can have these big discussions centered around what some people think are silly stories, but I adore them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that sets folklore and myth and legend aside from a lot of other disciplines. When you compare them both to science and you compare them to other broader aspects of history, we're not looking for the truth necessarily. This is something I've spoken about before. We're not trying to prove that ghosts exist. We're not trying to prove that a particular monster exists or doesn't. Well, at least most of us are not.
Sure.
But we're trying to talk about the narrative behind it, why people's experiences stay the same, differ, travel from place to place, become embedded. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But
Sure.
That's what gives us the fascination behind this, isn't it? It's not a case of going, okay, it exists, or it definitely doesn't exist, it's extinct. End of discussion. There's so much more we can cover.
Well, there's no fun in that either, right? I mean, and that's the highest crime in the land, isn't it? Right? No fun. Like I can think of no greater sin. What's curious to me is, where I live in New England, and I know this is nothing compared to old England, but we'll have houses 200, 250 years old, which are considered pretty old for this part of the country. I know that's nothing over there, but why is it you'll have 5 or 6 homes on one street that are all that old, and one of them they say is haunted, and the others they don't.
Yes.
I mean, just why? It's not just old means haunted. This one in particular. The other four, no one ever said anything about that. And it's not up to me or you if a building is haunted. It's up to a community. It's up to the people who live and work around it that whisper about that one particular building. And that's always drawn me in. Why? Why this one? Can I get inside? Can I go see? I want to see the ghost. If there's a ghost, I want to meet the ghost. And I've sort of been chasing that high since, I don't know, in my 20s.
And sometimes it's down to us whether a ghost continues to exist as well, I think, perhaps.
So for me, a legend is a living, breathing thing. It can be born, it can marry, it can relocate, and it can die. But the only way it dies is if we stop talking about it.
Yeah.
And again, that's not up to us either. Like that, it's got to, because if I stop talking about it, I'm just one voice. If other people keep talking about it, it lives. It's pretty much that simple. And to get a little more paranormal about it, for me, I think sometimes there has to be some sort of log thrown on the fire, right? If someone says, "Oh yeah, someone had a ghost sighting in that building 50 years ago," that's too far back, right? That legend's either dead or near dead.
Yeah.
If someone says, "Oh, someone said just last weekend they saw the ghost and it was caught on security camera, or they caught a weird photo or whatever," well, it just got another shot in the arm, right? It's now we're talking about it again. And then, as you know, sometimes these things make the news, like local news will do a little piece, and either their tongue in their cheek or not, whatever. I mean, it's still talking about it, and that keeps us all talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps the narrative going, and that's what's important, isn't it? We should
Yeah.
probably, before we go any further, clarify for some listeners, there'll be people listening to this or watching this from all over the world, what we mean when we talk about New England. So as far as the geography of the United States goes, New England comprises which part?
So we're the very northeastern corner, kind of like the creepy attic of New England, if you will. The 6 states up in the corner: Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, which and of course Maine borders Canada, and we're all up here on the Atlantic Ocean. So the very northeastern corner, Boston, things like that.
So when we talk about the folklore, the myths, the legends, these kinds of narratives within New England, what exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about folklore that materially differs from other parts of the US or other parts of the world? Or are we talking about similar themes? Because we've already alluded to the fact that, these stories travel, they become embedded in other places. The very name of New England suggests that perhaps some other people had some responsibility here as well.
They sure did, and they
Yeah.
talked like you.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what do we have in terms of kind of the folklore and the stories that were embedded in that part of the world
Sure.
pre
So,
us and so on?
so as with any region, right? Your legends are a stew, a gumbo, right? Every culture that's ever been there has ingredients in it. So we've got Native American legends that go way back, that were here and survive too. I mean, so for example, one of my favorites, the Wampanoag people who live in eastern Massachusetts and have been there for thousands of years. They have this legend of a Pukwudgie, which is a little magical miniature human that can turn into a ball of light, will-o'-the-wisp, could get you safely down the path and lead you back to your village, or lead you off the cliff and kill you, depended on their mood. You couldn't count on them to be good or bad. They did what they would do for whatever reason. And so this story survives, even though the Wampanoag, I mean, there's still reservations and things, Native American reservations, literally still around, but few and far between. But that story still gets kicked around, and I love that. And it matches, bits of Celtic folklore, British, and then also other parts of the world. Little magical humans that can turn into a ball of light. And that's really curious. So there's that, and then there's of course everything the Brits brought over, whether you've got phantom hitchhikers or gray ladies, green ladies, white ladies, Black dogs, we have all that too. And I think a lot of that is just because when people move and they see something strange, they use their best language to interpret it. And if you grew up in England with black dogs or white ladies or whatever, and you see something here, you say, well, that's it's here too, right? That's it. That's the black dog or the white lady, and so we've got plenty of those as well.
And can we see the influence of incoming cultures on the stories that already exist there? Do we see over time that for example, stories of the Pukwudgie sort of start to change, start to develop, start to take on other aspects based on the people that are coming in and adding to them?
Yeah, well, the Pukwudgie hasn't changed a lot as far as I know. I mean, these legends weren't written down, right? The Wampanoag didn't have a written language, so it was just oral tradition that got passed from one to the other. One that's interesting is we have a phantom hitchhiker in Massachusetts on Route 44, the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44. Phantom hitchhikers exist all over the world. The narrative is very similar. You see him, he's gone. And he's been around for a good 50, 60 years. People have been reporting on this one stretch of road. There's a town line, Rehoboth and Seekonk. And right at the town line, he's seen. And this is a pretty good stretch of road. The speed limit is like 50 miles an hour. So it's not some backcountry road. I mean, this is a major thoroughfare where cars go by pretty quick. And over time, you would just see this man with red hair, disheveled, wearing a flannel shirt, and then he'd just vanish. And then in the 1980s, it started to sort of match more like what you would expect to see in a horror movie. So he gets into the car or a car hits him, and there's damage. Of course, you can't find any record of this. It's just that it's hearsay, right? Or he gets in the car and he starts laughing and then vanishes after he's been driving with you for a little while, or his face fills the windshield, and you're driving down the road at 50. So they got more and more sort of matching what the Hollywood narrative would be. I worked on a project for the History Channel, and we were at a local gas station just talking to like a teenage girl, high school girl, and she said, "Oh, I heard if you see him, he follows you home and kills you." And I said, "Oh, well, that's brand new. He'd never killed anybody before, right? I mean, that's not he never killed anybody. He was just sort of there." And so the times will, of course, alter some of these legends as well, and as will the teller, of course.
I wonder if that's an aspect that's been added by kind of the retelling of that narrative by teens over time that add that kind of horror element to it.
I remember talking to a local police officer, and we interviewed him for the show, and we said, I said, the redheaded hitchhiker of Route 44 is absolutely a Rehoboth police issue. I mean, it's something the police have to deal with. He said, "Oh, if I ever see it, I'm turning in my badge." I said, "That's not what I'm talking about." But there's people pulled over there at night looking for the ghost, and it's not safe to do that, right? I mean, there's a highway packed practically. And he said, "Oh, yeah, that's true." He said, "I've been there many nights, been like, get out of here. You can't be out here ghost hunting, on next to the road." And I said, "So, that's pretty real to me. You know what I mean? Like that's that's rather tangible that you have to file a report because of the redheaded hitchhiker, even if you didn't see him."
No, it makes me think a little bit about so one of the stories out of Vermont is the Curse of Black Agnes.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is a story that kind of resonates in this way, I think, because we have other examples in other cemeteries, in other graveyards, of similar things. So this is a statue, or a very ornate grave, that over time the bronze or whatever the statue is originally made out of has become weathered and has turned black, which obviously gives it a creepy element to start with, right?
Of course, right.
And then we have stories start to come around this where obviously bad things will happen if you do particular things, if you touch the statue, if you sit on the lap of the statue, and
you'll
so
die.
On. Exactly. And then the narrative gets shaped shaped through legend tripping and things like that. And we see this in other areas as well. So teens will dare each other to go and try and witness something, or they'll start to add other elements. You get, I don't know, high school lads taking their girlfriends to the cemetery, and it's like, well, they do say that, if you have sex in front of the statue, then something, and then, you can see how this will shape the narrative. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so sure. So it's in Montpelier, which is the capital city of Vermont, and Black Agnes. It's interesting. Yes, the bronze did weather, and it turns green and then black and so on. So John Hubbard is buried underneath, and he was quite a prominent and wealthy person who donated the library. It's named after him, things like that. And he had this huge monument commissioned for his grave, and you can't miss it. It's this beautiful hillside cemetery, and this thing's rather huge. There's a semicircle of stonework, and then the statue's in the middle, right atop of his tomb, and it's a sitting figure. And the funny thing is, it's not even a woman. I mean, it looks absolutely feminine, no question, but it's not. It's a man, and it's a representation of death, literally. And not only that, it's not even the only Black Agnes in the United States. It's not even the first Black Agnes, but it's been called that because the story sort of got passed around, from other parts of the country and so on. But one of the stories goes that if you sit on its lap, which is pretty disrespectful in general. I mean, it is someone's grave, if you sit on its lap, you'll die. And here's the most troubling thing you may hear today, Mark. That is 100% true. You absolutely guaranteed, without any exception whatsoever, will die.
It might just take a while.
It could take 50, 60 years, but
yeah.
But damn it. When you're on your deathbed taking those final breaths, you're going to be like, "Oh, Black Agnes. Sorry there, John Hubbard. Sorry." Yeah.
Yeah, it brought that to mind because I think it's a good example of something where stories can be shaped, the narrative can change through the interaction, through ostension or through legend tripping. Yeah.
But also too, sometimes these stories, I know from talking to plenty of Brits about gray ladies and green ladies that haunt the ruins of castles. Your parents would reinforce these legends because they could be dangerous places to play. You could be in a castle ruin and you could break your arm or leg, or you could die. You could fall through something and literally die.
Yeah.
So if a ghost can keep you away, then we tell the story and we tell it well. We tell it really well because I can't always be there to watch what you're doing, but the ghost can. And so on the one hand, things like this, like, hey, don't sit on the grave. You'll die. It's bad luck. But the thing about being cursed, of course, is that if you believe you're cursed, you're cursed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of truth in that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of stories across New England, a lot of different variations of stories, be it ghosts or monsters or whatever, a lot to unpack. But conveniently, you have written a book on this subject, which is what we're going to use to draw all of this together. So your book is called Wicked Strange. Explain why your book is called Wicked Strange.
So in many parts of New England, wicked is a very common word that we use. You can all have it. If anyone who wants to use it, I adore it. It simply means very. It is wicked cold out. It is wicked hot out. This food is wicked good. Like it, and you say it with a Boston accent, and it sounds even better. But they use it in Maine, they use it in Rhode Island, parts of northern Connecticut. So it's kind of a colloquial term that we used, and one that we all adore. So wicked strange is that's it. It's the stuff that sticks out: eccentrics, roadside oddities, ghosts, monsters, plenty of UFOs. Every state's got its prominent sightings and things like that. So the stories that kind of became the croutons in the salad that is New England.
And you collaborated on this with a photographer, Frank Grace, whose work is stunning, it has to be said. Tell us a little bit about how this project came about and how you undertook it, because there's a lot of work involved to get out to all of these places, to record the stories, to record the photographs. And Frank uses a very particular style, doesn't he, with his photography as well?
Yeah, he's amazing. So Frank and I met, oh gosh, maybe about 15 years ago. At the Lizzie Borden house, a famous haunt here in Massachusetts. We have nursery rhymes about her murdering her parents. So I was a fan of his work. I'd seen what he could do. I mean, he tells an entire story with a photograph. And it started, I said, hey, I've always wanted to do a calendar of New England, haunts, but I'm not a good enough photographer. Would you want to collaborate on that? And so we started this annual calendar, and every year we would add 3 or 4 new locations and so on. And at the same time, I started a podcast called New England Legends, where we share these stories every single week. And what's great about the podcast is it's become a lot more popular, and our stories are practically crowdsourced at this point. So, you get emails almost daily saying, "Oh, I live in this little town and we've got this story." And so suddenly you find another great lead you never would have heard of because you didn't grow up in that town. And so, as the catalog of stories kept growing because of the podcast and because of our calendar, I mean, we always knew we wanted to do a book. And it's just, I think the sheer volume of stories got big enough that we said, we've been working on this for years and years. Let's just sit down and put it together. And so he's just such a great collaborator. He's an amazing photographer. And, and as you know, too, like some of these stories are so visual. Like, you need to see it. You want to see the grave. You want to see Black Agnes. You want to see, the strange oddity that we're talking about. And so thankfully we've got his photos.
Yeah, and it is a beautiful kind of coffee table book as well. So it's easy to dip into, but it's also very easy to read from start to finish if you want to take that route. And yes, the photos really do add such a lot to it. How did you kind of shortlist what you wanted to put in? Because as you say, there's so much rich material here, and you've got a good representation, to my mind, as somebody who lives outside of the area, of well-known stories that you would probably expect to see in a
Sure.
book like this, and people would be very quick to turn around and go, "Well, you didn't put that in." But
I
also
know.
a lot of other material which is perhaps not so well known as well.
That was all part of the design. So this is probably a bit inside baseball, as they say here, but it was almost like drafting players for your team. So we had the 6 states. We knew we wanted an equal number of stories from all 6 states. I didn't want anyone to say, oh, Vermont got more than us in Rhode Island or whatever. So 17 stories from each of the 6 states. We knew we couldn't have just all UFOs in one state. So we found, like, I think it was one UFO story from each of the 6. We didn't want all cemeteries, right? So it was about spreading out the types of stories, spreading out geographically, so the representation is sort of there. But you're right, we've heard plenty of complaints. I can't believe you didn't include this, or the Lizzie Borden house, which I already mentioned. We put that in because it's almost like a band, right? You've got to play the hits.
Yeah.
You can't go to a concert and be like, you didn't play anything from the greatest hits album. You sort of have to. And then, like you said too, we wanted to make sure there were things in here that you probably hadn't heard of.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm flicking through very much at random to just have a look. There are things like Champ the Lake Monster, which I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with.
Sure.
There are a couple of black dogs in here, which certainly for those of us over in the UK, you would probably expect to see, I suspect. But then a lot of other kind of stories which are less well known as well. Any particular go-tos for you that were your favorites looking into this?
So there's one there's one story that I adore. I don't know if we have the story in it, but I know we have the picture. So I've been to Stonehenge in England. It's an amazing site. It's beautiful to see. You stand there and say, how in the world did they do this? We have an America's Stonehenge in southern New Hampshire, which is another monolithic site, but nowhere near as grandiose as the one in England. But in Massachusetts, there's a place called Ponyhenge. And Ponyhenge dates all the way back to the ancient year of 2010. And someone had put out a child's rocking horse into a field as part of a Halloween display. And they had a headless horseman on it. And they took the headless horseman down, but they left the rocking horse there. And it's a little field on a street that not heavily traveled, but it's one of those streets that you'd cut through if you're on a commute. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, another one appeared. So someone who drove by it every day said, "Oh, I've got one at home," and just left it there. And then another and another, until there were dozens. And the person who owns the land would just sort of rearrange them as they had to cut the grass. And now there's probably 60, 70. Some get stolen, new ones show up, and they're always in some sort of unique shape. And I adore that this has become sort of like there was never a plan, there's no sign, but people stop here all day long and contribute to it, or just take pictures or take selfies with it or do Instagram reels or what have you. and it's simply a collective roadside oddity display, a legend in the making that we can trace back literally just 16 years ago. That just sort of begs some questions, and it asks nothing of you other than to smile, right? That's it. That's it.
Do you think things like that happen so much more readily these days because of the influence of social media and things like that? You know the way that legends spread or even form like that, or the way that people interact with stories now, the opportunities that people might take to go legend tripping or do something like that because they've seen something on an Instagram reel, it really contributes to that kind of spread of narrative.
Absolutely. So legend tripping to me, you go check out a legend because you want to become part of the story. It's very egocentric, right? If someone says that house is haunted, I want to go in. I want to see if I can see it, and I might come out and have my own story, or I might come out and say, I don't know, it could be all just bunk or whatever, or who knows, right? And anything in between. If a place gets famous, like Ponehenge or whatever, or Black Agnes for that matter, if a place gets famous because people go there and want to become part of the story, and in today's culture, when you want to become part of any story, you have to take a selfie and it has to go on social media or it didn't happen. And that includes standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. You're in Paris. What do you not go? Do you have superpowers? You're not going to take that photo of you in front of the, Eiffel Tower. You're going to go to Big Ben, and not take a picture in front of Westminster or like whatever. You have to. And you're showing off. Look at where I am. And it's the same with these legends. So that certainly helps propagate these stories a lot faster than they probably ever have in human history. What would have been just a small curiosity in a local town can turn into a regional or national one in days, if enough people click enough photos, which is really interesting, right? Folklore, I think, works the same as it's ever worked. It just goes faster
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it obviously contributes to the spread of global story so much more readily as well. So it's very easy to comment on and to share stories globally, and this is like the online equivalent, I guess, of people coming to your particular cultural area and settling there, and your stories being shaped by that. Now you can just hit a share button and share it with a circle of friends or family or whoever, make a comment on it, misinterpret it, as people often do with these things, and suddenly the legend takes a whole new shape.
Of course it does. And also, I mean, you do start to see patterns, right? So there has to be unanswered questions.
Mm.
I mean, if we knew who killed Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother and they confessed to it, we're not even, you've never heard of Lizzie Borden then, right? I mean, that would have been a story that died out over 125 years ago. Yes, there has to be some unanswered questions and just enough wiggle room for speculation. And that speculation is, let's face it, that's where the fun is. That's where the party's at.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where the open bar is, and the cocktails and the buffet, all of that's where it sits.
I think it's worth saying though that not everything that is covered in this book uh, would fit under sort of broad headings like UFOs and ghosts and all of
Sure.
those sorts of things. And in fact, not everything that is covered in this book is what you would class as standard folklore or a
No,
standard
not at all.
legend or those sorts of things. Because a
Yeah.
lot of these things are, as you say, oddities. So therefore they are something quirkier, like the rocking horse assemblage, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Boston tea kettle.
Yes, of course.
Explain that one.
So there's a tea kettle. It's I would label that as a roadside oddity, even though this is one you'd probably walk by as opposed to drive by. And the tea kettle has been there a long time, and it was originally just a way to draw in customers, right? Well, it still is, frankly. But there have been various businesses over time that have come and gone, but the tea kettle sort of remains. And once you've grown up with generations that know the tea kettle, it becomes it becomes like a waypoint. If you're, oh, there's the tea kettle, so we're almost there, right? it's another few blocks walk, and then you can get to Fenway Park and watch the Red Sox and things like that. So yeah, it's really just a billboard sort of thing, but it actually does have steam that comes out of it, which is lovely. And then I forgive me, it's jumped out of my head. I think it's a Starbucks now, but it didn't used to be.
But they kept the kettle in place.
Absolutely, yeah, of
Yeah,
course they did. Yeah.
yeah. Because sometimes there's just there's no way that you can remove something like that because it's so well known, and there'd be an outcry if you did.
Yeah, it was originally the Steaming Kettle coffee shop, and it was a place to buy tea and coffee, of course,
Yeah,
which you'd expect. But yes, it does endure, which is adorable.
yeah. And not everything in here is something that you can necessarily go and visit. So there are historical elements to this as well. So sticking with Boston, for example, you cover, and it's quite a well-known story, the molasses flood,
Yeah,
which sounds quirky and sounds like, a humorous bit of end of news broadcast type story, but of course was a massive tragedy.
it was horrible, and it's one of those stories. Sometimes I think retelling these stories is important because so the Boston molasses flood occurred because they were storing molasses in these massive tanks, and there was a leak in the tank. And so what they did was they painted the tank brown so you couldn't see the leak. This is problem number one, right? You're saying, I know how to fix the leak, paint the tank, And so children used to come and take molasses. It would just be dripping out of the tank. They'd hold a little can up under it, bring the molasses home or whatever. This was being used to make weapons grade alcohol. They were using it for that. The weather had turned cold. The rivets were starting to pop, and the tank was filled beyond capacity. And then it was a recipe for disaster. And so this tank lets go. There's an explosion, and a 35 mile an hour wave of molasses moved through the city, and it killed quite a number of people. And it made a mess for literally years to come. And the reason I think it's important to keep telling these stories is that worker safety didn't come in second or even third, or I mean, it might have come in fifth or sixth, right? This was a time when profits, were the most important thing. Worker safety be damned. We'll just paint the thing instead of fixing the leak, or making a better, holding tank for molasses. And of course, that can still happen today, right? So sometimes these are cautionary tales where you say, "Wow, I can't believe that they didn't have safety protocols in place for this new construction project." And you say, "Yeah, that's not new." Let me tell you about the molasses flood, and it's so outrageous. Like you said, it sounds funny until you hear the details and realize, people were killed. And then you hear that story and you say, "Wow, how far have we come in 100 years?" Maybe not as far as we would have hoped. And so I think sometimes these tales can serve as a modern caution to the workers today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then we can go to other extremes, and some of them just sound particularly silly. I think I mentioned in my review of this book on the podcast website, just because I think it's my favorite story name out of all of them, The Spectre Moose of Lobster Lake. Which is a story that feels like it has every element you might want. What can you tell us about that?
So the funny thing is, if you grew up in New England, and I just said, "Can I tell you about the spectral moose of Lobster Lake?" The next word out of your mouth is, "I bet that's in Maine." Right? It's the most Maine headline I could have ever come up with, right? I mean, it's got it all. Maine is known for moose. So is New Hampshire and things like that. The further north you go in New England, moose are a thing. And in fact, you'll see signs on the side of the road, "Brake for moose, it could save your life." And they mean it. If you hit a moose with your car, you could die. That is absolutely a very large animal to hit with a car. And so there was this moose, and this story started making the rounds in the newspaper. Lobster Lake is this little out of the way lake in Maine, and people saw a white moose that they said was absolutely massive. And of course, hunters want to prove their prowess and go bag the thing. And then the story just gets bigger and bigger, just like a fishing tale, right? The fish I caught was this big. And every time you tell it, it gets bigger. Here's the thing. There are albino moose. Like it can happen. It's very rare, but once in a while, someone will catch a photograph of one, but they're normal sized. They're typically look like any other moose except they're albino. They're white in color. But this one sort of stuck out. So on the one hand, you say, well, someone probably saw an albino moose. That makes sense. And near Lobster Lake, sure. And then they wanted to hunt it because that's what humans do. Like, oh, let's kill it, right? And put it up on my wall. But again, the old newspaper accounts said he was twice the size of a normal moose, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And I love that story too. It's just so fun, so Maine.
But interesting that we can draw comparisons here because we have similar stories in the countryside over here with stags, with male deer, and you get white stags, very rare, but you do. But then they take on a different kind of aspect, and they go back to more kind of being tied into Celtic ideas or pagan ideas or nature spirits and those sorts of things, rather than being a ghost. But essentially underlying it all, exactly the same thing. There's a white animal, and then ultimately somebody wants to kill it as well, of course.
and you anything that sticks out, right? Anything that's not of the norm, we point at it. Maybe we gawk, maybe we admire it, maybe we're afraid of it. And again, this speaks to such bigger human issues, right? Like, you saw a white moose, we should kill it. Well, why?
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just my first thought, something different than the norm, kill it. Okay, got it.
There's never a good reason for that decision. It's just
no, but
it's the case.
Right, but you say like, well, kill it, photograph it, sure. I mean, that sounds interesting, but prove to others that it's real. But yeah, that is such an instinctual thing. Like, yeah, we're gonna need to kill that thing.
And then sticking with Maine, because these two are side by side in the book, so there's a kind of a natural run on here as well. You then cover the story of Razor Shins, which is a very different story, and this very firmly has its roots, I think, probably in kind of more indigenous culture, doesn't it?
Sure.
And this is well, it's very difficult to describe what it might be. Tell the story.
Yeah, sure.
We'll pull it out.
So the Maine was known for logging for a long, long time. There's tons of forest up there, and it was a lot of timber was cut down and used to build, the rest of New England, the rest of America, really. And there was a time in the 1800s when logging camps they said there was always, what's the joke? There was always three shifts, one working, one coming off the shift, one quitting, right? So if you could hold an axe, you'd be hired pretty much that day, and you might last a day, you might last a week. When you went out to these logging camps, they would tell you stories. Razor Shins is a Native American sort of like wood spirit, a man though, who has, instead of shins, he's got like swords for his lower parts of his legs. And if he chooses to, he could swing his leg and scalp you with just a kick of his leg and take you out. Also, he could choose to help you. He could cut down some of your trees for you. Or he could protect you from others. And what they would tell the greenhorns, they were called, the guys that were just starting to work the shift at the logging camps, they'd say, when you come to camp, you need to bring a jug of whiskey or rum, depending on your mood, I guess, and leave it out in front of your tent as an offering to Razor Shins. And if you do that, he might help you. You might find a couple of your trees knocked down for you as a thank you. If you don't do it, well, then you're taking your life in your own hands. And Mark, believe it or not, when you left a big jug of whiskey outside of your tent in a logging camp in Maine, by the morning, I guarantee you it was gone. So cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
It would be gone. And maybe a couple of your trees might be down for you because it was good whiskey or good rum. And the story continues. And you tell that, of course, it's part initiation, it's part, all those things. And you're in a part of the country where this was their home, the Native Americans, and there were wars fought up there. The King William's War was fought in Maine, which was a Native American against British forces and French forces. And, so there was always, there was always that presence even well into the 1800s. So seeing a Native American out in the wild wasn't unheard of. It wasn't impossible, and people, would fear that to a degree. Fear, retribution for any number of things.
And I think the story kind of brings us full circle back to the beginning there as well, where we're talking about small humans that can turn themselves into balls of light and will either help or will hinder. So it's the underlying narrative again is very similar, even though the stories are very different, perhaps.
And the moral, the takeaway, right, is that I always thought all these legends are to some degree are a sermon from the past, right? And we are its ministers, right? We tell the story, and I think a good story, you let it fall where it falls, right? The lesson will be heard by those who need to hear it, just like a sermon. And I like the idea of, if you work within the environment and with the people who are there and things like that, you will be more successful. And that's maybe the takeaway of both stories, Pukwudgie and Razor Shins, right? If you don't buck the system, if you stay with us, do what you're told, be helpful, then you might get a reward. And if you don't, you could be punished, including losing your life.
Let's wrap this particular subject up by bringing it up to date, perhaps. So a lot of these stories are historic, in different ways, whether they're true life stories like the Molasses Flood, or whether they come from indigenous culture and have developed over time, or so on. But some of them, like the Rocking Horses, are much more recent. What's the kind of state of folklore in New England in the present day? I mean, these stories obviously still resonate. They still spread. People still interact with them. Do we see much in the way of new story developing?
Sure. I mean, haunting is I think an easy one. When something bad happens, it's a certain number of years, not a lot of them, just a few. You need to get far enough away. You can't be too close, where people will start talking about ghost sightings. For example, there was a nightclub where there was a horrible fire and dozens of people were killed in Rhode Island. Oh, forgive me, I don't know the day, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. Okay. And the building had been razed almost immediately. It was a makeshift memorial for a long time. And now people sort of talk about those grounds being haunted. And that's natural, right? That's a natural, normal state. A horrible thing took place right here, and now people are sort of reliving it. And it's a way to keep that that tragedy alive. Because again, how it happened was that they were using indoor pyrotechnics. A rock band was using indoor pyrotechnics, and it caught the walls on fire. And way too many people were stuck in there and couldn't get out. And so many people died and didn't have to, right? There's any number of things that could have gone differently. Yeah. And that should haunt us. That should haunt us. So if we keep that story around, if we ever find ourselves in a nightclub and someone's using pyrotechnics and you realize it's not a good scene, maybe you get out remembering this story because of a ghost story.
Well, folklore teaches lessons, doesn't it? And the way that it teaches lessons will change over time depending on the type of story and the environment that we're in, but also the lessons that need to be taught. And sometimes those lessons are preventative, and sometimes they develop based on happenings like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course. There's a story in Western Massachusetts. It's called The Monster of Coca-Cola Ledge, and which, another great name, right? Yeah. So in North Adams, Massachusetts, there's this cliff face that overlooks the town. It's called Coca-Cola Ledge because for a few years, I think it was the 1920s or so, they had a big Coca-Cola logo painted on it. And that had long been removed, but the name sort of stuck. It's technically called Witt's Ledge. And it's well over 100 feet tall at the highest point, but it's a very gradual hill on either side. So you can walk to the top quite easily, going up either hill. The monster up there, by all accounts, sounds like a Bigfoot creature, 7 foot tall, hairy, covered in hair creature. And parents warn their kids, don't go up there because the monster of Coca-Cola Ledge will get you. People have indeed fallen off that cliff. And if you fall off that cliff, you don't need an ambulance. Take your time. There's no rush. You will not survive, right? So I found newspaper accounts of people who died, falling off the cliff. there's a local college up there where the fraternities will paint their Greek letters on the cliff, which is quite dangerous. And if they fall again, the result would be the same. And so I think part of this is just like the gray lady, right? Or green lady that you tell the story because you want to keep your kids safe. But at the same time, also, I remember I talked to someone local who said, "Oh no, I think we saw him one time. We saw the big hairy creature up there and we hightailed it out." And I went, "Oh, that's amazing." But the story persists and it's and I guess a great name, you can't say enough about how important that part of it is. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And a name like that is it's only going to help, isn't it? Yeah,
It's gonna stick.
yeah,
If it was called something boring, you might forget it, but
yeah.
you remember that one.
What about in terms of tourism and visiting the area? There's many of these stories that you're able to interact with in that way. Things like the Lizzie Borden house. Obviously, you can go and visit. Is there much else of that sort of ilk?
Yeah, absolutely. We most of the stories we covered, they're places, actually not most of, I think all. That was one of our other rules. You have to be able to go there. Now, you're not going to see the molasses flood if you go there today, but you could see where it was, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So every one of these places is accessible to some degree. Legally, you can go visit, Haunted Lake or whatever, and at least stand in front of it. So we've got so that was part of it. And there are people that that's their idea of a good time is to go see these places, take their stories for, Instagram and Facebook and so on. But yeah, and there is a degree of sort of darker tourism. All the cities have ghost tours. Portland, Maine has got the International Cryptozoology Museum.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Lizzie Borden house. It's a bed and breakfast. You can literally rest your head where someone's skull was crushed in and and have a night's sleep. So yeah, so that I think there is an element of people wanting to become part of these stories in a more intimate way.
Yeah. So there you go. Wicked Strange. Not only a good read and educating in terms of the folklore and the stories, but also a very good travel guide as well.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. What are you working on now?
So I'm still doing my New England Legends podcast, which
Yeah.
is which could easily feed a volume two of the book if need be. And also, I'm working on a collection of Christmas ghost stories. I had written a book about Krampus and Christmas monsters a couple of years ago, and that one it's so much fun when you realize that this was always the darkest and scariest holiday before Halloween sort of usurped it, and especially in this country. But I think people are really starting to lean into the darker side of Christmas again
Mm.
because we just made it too saccharine sweet. We went too far. And so the pushback is let's bring in the ghosts and the monsters. And so I'm kind of really enjoying that.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of revival of the kind of ghost story for Christmas tradition, both on TV and in print as
Yeah.
well. I think, yeah, there's been a lot of
Yeah.
revival of interest in Krampus for sure, and those sorts of things, and the Icelandic
Yeah.
Christmas
Oh,
stories, which are just horrific.
Iceland's the best. They have the best monsters by far. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. Doctor Who
Mhm.
Christmas specials. I mean come on. They're tipping their hat to all the Victorian ghost stories and things like that. And yeah, which are amazing.
Yeah, they really are. That
Yeah.
sounds absolutely excellent. If people want to find you online, where should they go for that?
My website's my name, jeffbelanger.com, or my podcast is New England Legends, wherever you get your podcasts.
I will put links to all of those places on the episode page for this episode on the Folklore Podcast website, so you can save your keyboard and just click and go there directly. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I wish you well with all of those future projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
You can find the New England Legends TV series on Amazon Prime Video and the podcast in all of the places where you can listen to podcasts. Jeff's website, which is linked from the episode page for this episode on the Folklore Podcast website, is at jeffbelanger.com. I'll be off to the UK Ghost Story Festival in Derby at the end of this month, where I'll be hoping to record some future content for the podcast, as well as presenting and enjoying many other great talks and lectures too. If you're listening to this on release, there is still time to grab a ticket to join us. And if you can't, then I'll be bringing you some of the content here in the weeks to come. In the next episode, I'll release the remaining content which I held back from last year's festival as a taster as well. Now, I'll be rounding off some future episodes of the podcast this year with folk songs being released from the archives of the influential American folklorist Ellen Stekert. Now, Ellen is a past president of the American Folklore Society, a singer and musician, as well as being described as one of America's leading authorities on folklore. Over many decades, Ellen has collected a unique archive of traditional and folk song recordings, and the Ellen Stekert Project has been remastering and releasing some of these back to the public. The Folklore Podcast is happy to be supporting this, having been given permission by the project and by Ellen herself to feature some of these tracks on the show. Today, we play out with Golden Apples of the Sun, a lost recording from the archives from 1966. Golden Apples of the Sun sets W.B. Yeats's poem Song of the Wandering Aengus to a melody Ellen has carried with her for decades. The beauty of this Yeats poem is perfectly matched by its musical setting, she says. Yet for many years, the origins of that setting had slipped from memory. Ellen says, "I'd long forgotten where I learned the music to which the poem is set, even as she remembered Judy Collins's stunning rendering of it on one of her early recordings. The answer resurfaced unexpectedly during a visit in 1966, when her friend and fellow folk singer Dave Van Ronk stopped by while passing through Detroit. Ellen had been friends with Van Ronk since meeting him at Izzy Young's bookstore in the mid-1950s, where the folk revival movement began to blossom. His visit was filled with music, Ellen says, and among the songs he played was Golden Apples, using his setting. I realised then that it was his setting that I had learned. The single carries particular historical value because it preserves Van Ronk's distinctive setting of the song, one that Ellen absorbed so fully that it became inseparable from her own singing. When you sing a song that you love, you absorb it, and it becomes impossible to think that there ever was a time when you did not know it, she reflects. That was true for me of the Golden Apples. In words that echo Yeats himself, Ellen describes the way songs become part of the singer. I wondered at how we make songs our own, how they become a part of us. Or, as Yeats said, you cannot tell the dancer from the dance. Or, I thought, the singer from the song. I hope you enjoy this recording and that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Don't forget to keep in touch via social media or email and let me know your thoughts. And remember, I've started releasing previously unheard episodes for free via the Folklore Podcast Patreon community. Head over to patreon.com/thefolklorepodcast and sign up as a free member to hear them. If you like what you get there, you can consider upgrading for a small amount each month for other content, or just stay as a free member and join the community. Thanks for listening, and here is Golden Apples of the Sun.
If I have a bit of genius, and I believe I do, it's for my friends. I went out to the Hazelwood because a fire was in my head. I cut and peeled a hazel one and hooked the berry to a were on the wing, and moth-like stars were glittering out. I dipped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. On the ground, I stooped to blow a fire aflame. Something rustled in the leaves, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glittering girl with apple blossoms in her hair. Who called me by my name and ran vanished in the brightening air. Though I am old, we're wandering hollow land and hilly lands. I will find out where she has gone. Her face and take her hand and walk through long green dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done. Silver apples of the moon. and apples of the sun. It's the you.